What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another retro Yu-Gi-Oh format rulings video. And in this video, we're going to be covering Imperial Format, the things that you need to know if you want to play this format. Now, again, just like I mentioned in my treasure format video, a lot of these rulings will have been covered in previous videos, so I'm not going to go through every card that appears on screen. If you want to learn more about an individual card that I don't talk about here, then you can check out my previous rulings videos for those. But, even though some of these rulings aren't new, they are still very important. Things like Cannon Soldier do still see play in this format, as well as Sandgate and Witch, of course, and things like Mystic Tomato. Quick play spells still work the same way they did in Treasure format, and Cyberjar and Spirit Cretin do see play in some Empty Jar decks, so they are important to know about. And speaking of Spirit Cretin, there actually is an additional ruling that's new to Imperial format that wasn't actually in Treasure format. So let's start off this video by discussing that. Spirit Cretin is a flip effect monster, so you might think that its flip effect would be negated with something like Ceasefire, which is a trap that allows you to flip up all face-down monsters on the field, and flip effect monsters' effects are not activated at the time those monsters are flipped up. However, because Spirit Cretin's effect activates when it's sent to the graveyard after being flipped up, its effect still will be able to trigger even after your opponent has Ceasefired you, as long as the Spirit Cretin does get sent to the graveyard when it's destroyed. So that's a very interesting sort of niche scenario that actually can come up, especially if you are siding in Ceasefire against decks playing Spirit Cretin, so it's very good to know about. Moving along with the discussion of cards that bring back monsters from the graveyard face down, we've got the Shallow Grave. And as I mentioned in Treasure format, Spirit Cretin allows you to use its effect even if both players don't have monsters in the graveyard. Shallow Grave does not work this way. Shallow Grave, both players do need to have monsters in the graveyard to use and resolve this effect. So that's something good to know if you are planning on playing Shallow Grave in an Empty Jar style deck. But while these rulings that I just discussed are a little bit niche, the big new ruling that arises from this format is how Imperial Order interacts with Jinzo. Now, Imperial Order and Jinzo are both some of the major cards in this format that really impact a lot of play, and most decks do play them. And it's not uncommon to find yourself with a Jinzo and an Imperial Order both face up on the field at the same time. Now, in the modern version of the game, maintenance costs cannot be negated by things like Jinzo. So if you did have Jinzo and Imperial Order on the field at the same time, then you would still have to pay the 700 life points to keep Imperial around every turn. But back in Imperial format, this actually wasn't the case, and you actually don't have to pay for Imperial Order's maintenance costs while Jinzo is face up on the field. So that's an important sort of difference between this format and modern formats that is very important to know. In addition, while on the topic of Imperial Order, I do have to mention that, Imperial Order was errated later in the game's history, so that you have to pay 700 life points during every standby phase, and it's non-optional, like you have to pay it if you have over 700 life points. But in Imperial, this is optional, so you can choose to let Imperial Order be destroyed by not paying its maintenance cost, and you also only have to pay that maintenance cost during your standby phase. So it's a bit better in Imperial format than it is in the modern day. Now, this is the main new ruling that the format introduces, but there are two other rulings that I want to mention before closing out this video. The first of which is Acid Trap Hole. Now, Acid Trap Hole is a very interesting card that's a video game promo, and it actually has some very interesting applications in decks that really do want their flip effects to go through. So if your opponent activates something like a Ceasefire or Nobleman of Crossout on a set monster, then you can actually chain Acid Trap Hole to that to flip up your monster and allow it to get its flip effect off before it would get, banished by Nobleman or flipped face up by Ceasefire. Now, in most cases, this will also destroy the monster that you're doing this on, as I'm pretty sure there are no flip effect monsters at this point in the game with over 2,000 defense. But it's a very important sort of interaction that a lot of these Empty Jar-esque decks sort of do, so it's very important to know about. And lastly, we've got a bit of a disappointing ruling here. We've got Burning Land. Now, Burning Land is a card that you might look at it and be like, wow, this card's great for burn decks, because basically it's a continuous spell that inflicts 500 damage to your opponent during each of their standby phases. However, it does in fact need a field spell to be on field in order to be activated. So the first part of Burning Land does need to go through in order to activate this, and that becomes a lot worse for burn decks that do want to play it, as there's no guarantee that your opponent will be playing a field spell, so then you have to resort to playing a field spell on your own and destroying it with Burning Land, and that really isn't worth it for a lot of decks. So this is a very important ruling that sort of invalidates Burning Land as a useful card for the burn decks, although I'm sure there are probably some jank burn brews that will play it with field spells as well. But that's going to do it for the new ruling that Imperial Format adds. It didn't really add too many as compared to Treasure and Critter, but don't worry, my next rulings video on Android will add quite a bit, so look forward to that. But let me know if you think I missed anything down in the comments below, and until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.